Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is FPC Radio Live. It's Tuesday, May the 30th, and kind of got a stinker for a Game 7 last night. Not because the Celtics lost, well, because the game really wasn't competitive. And quite frankly, John, that first quarter between both teams until the last few minutes where the Heat, started to put some points on the board, that looked like some pretty bad basketball to start the game, and I was like, man, we are in for a long night.
Yeah, okay, so if you get to Game 7, one team's won 3 in a row, should be playing with some momentum, but they appear to be tight. They weren't efficient on offense, and I'm talking about the Boston Celtics, obviously, and the Heat looked exhausted early in the game, and the Celtics had opportunities if they hit some threes in the first quarter to maybe build a double-digit lead early and maybe put the Heat really behind the 8 ball. Instead, the Celtics go 0 for 10 on threes in the first quarter, and are down double digits most of the game.
They were 0 for 11 at one point.
They were horrible the last 2 games. They were a grand total of 16 for 77 from 3 the last 2 games, and they managed to win one of those games, which is shocking in that own sense. But yeah, they just love taking threes. Joe Mazzulla says the biggest stat in basketball is 3-point field goals attempted, which I still don't understand where he gets that from, but good luck to him.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't do him too well, especially yesterday when they had attempted 5 or 6 more 3-pointers and Miami had hit double the number of 3-pointers at that point. And it's like, okay, at what point, how many attempts don't matter? And it's like, look, you had an opportunity early on. Like I said, when Miami wasn't shooting well, you had opportunities. You had chances to take an early lead and you didn't do it. And then all of a sudden you just commit to the 3. And at a certain point, John, it's like you put yourself in a position where you have no choice because you fall behind so much. But the reason you fell behind was because you got away from what did you very well in Game 6, and that was points in the paint. I mean, they dominated everywhere in Game 6 except for 3-point shooting, but yet they came into Game 7 thinking, well, we're just going to kill them with 3-point shooting. And it's very early on, it should have been apparent that it just wasn't maybe their night, and you have to adjust. Like, I can't believe that they sit there and watch the same game that we watch and sit there and say, you know what? It hasn't worked the first 10 times. Let's keep doing it. No. Like, figure out something different, and they just never did. It was a lot of, and it wasn't even that, it was just rush shots. Like, I mean, getting the ball and just hucking up a 35-foot shot. Like, what are you doing? Like, the Celtics,
not all threes are equal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you make 5, 6 passes, swing it around, all of a sudden you get an open 3. Go ahead and take it. They're all capable of making it. The problem is on the first or second pass, now you're chucking up a 3 with 17 seconds left on the shot clock. You're actually playing right into Miami's hands because now they don't have to exert themselves on defense as much because they're only playing defense for 7 or 8 seconds, and you're throwing up a 3. They rebounded. Now they can use their energy to get into their offense, which they did. You saw how Miami would get into their offense quickly. Their shooters would spot up, and they would end up with wide open threes. The Celtics weren't getting back on defense. So, yeah, it was just a horrible performance by the Celtics. They were up 9-4, and like we said, if they could have just hit a couple of threes along the way, build up that lead, the crowd going crazy, maybe it's a different outcome. But no, I mean, look, even after the game, Mazzulla was asked, would you have done anything differently in this series? And he quickly said no. So, I mean, that almost sounds like a question you'd ask a 12-year-old and get that response back. Do you realize that you did wrong by yelling at your teacher and not turning in your homework? No. Okay, well, we'll move on from there because he acts like a 12-year-old.
Well, look, I mean, at a certain point, though, it's on the players to execute. And look, Jaylen Brown was bad. Yeah, not just like an off game, but he was bad. I mean, the turnovers that he were committing. I mean, that last one, I think it was the last one where he just lost it. He just dribbled it and missed. And I believe that was his 7th turnover of the night. So
he ended up with 8.
Yeah, he ended up with 8. And I mean, we're not talking about like hard defensive I mean, more often than not, these were Jaylen Brown errors that led to these turnovers, and you just can't win playing basketball that way. Look, obviously Jason Tatum, it's unfortunate that he, anyone who saw the replay saw that he landed and rolled his ankle on the very first possession, and you could see that it was hindering him. But at the same time, I mean, they weren't just a tweak of I mean, Maybe so. I mean, obviously, Jason Tatum's capable of scoring a lot of points, um, but I feel like their issues extended far beyond an injury to Jason Tatum, and it was unfortunate to watch because it felt like even despite all those struggles, they had an opportunity to win and an opportunity to win this series. And going back to the early part of the game, you're missing shots when you could go up, 10, 12, 14 points. And all of a sudden, it's a completely different outlook to the game. And John, why did it take so long to get Grant Williams in there?
I've been saying that pretty much the second half of the season and throughout a lot of these playoffs. Yeah, he just, first of all, Malcolm Brogdon should not have played last night.
No,
he was clearly injured. I mean, his first shot looked like something I'd throw
it came
up.
out 10 feet short.
Yeah. Right. I thought it was a lob. And even then it was a bad lob at the point because the lob should be closer to the basket than that. So, yeah, Grant Williams, who does give them some energy, plays defense. The way the Celtics combated Miami's small ball lineup, because once Bam Adebayo goes out and Highsmith comes in, they're really small, is to take more threes rather than take it to the hole and attack that defense. Yeah. The Celtics just weren't ready for last night and didn't make the proper adjustments. The problem, too, with Jaylen Brown, like there are other high turnover guys in the league. Heck, LeBron turns the ball over a lot. The difference is those other high turnover guys get a lot of assists.
Yeah.
Like, we'll see Russell Westbrook has led the league in assists and turnovers in the same season, so you kind of put up with it. Jaylen Brown doesn't even create a lot of assists. He's just horrible. He's like a Jameis Winston of basketball. Yeah. Like, at least Winston.
Yeah, that's not good.
Touchdown passes that year, right? Yeah, Jaylen Brown turning the ball over, not really making any plays. When Tatum got hurt early in the game, I'm like, okay, this is the time where you have Jaylen Brown, second team All NBA, him to step up and give you 30.
And he hit a couple shots early. He hit a couple shots early, and you're like, okay, all right, Jaylen Brown's, and then it just went downhill from there. Because like at first you were thinking like, man, he's the only one that was like feeling it. I mean, he had a couple really awkward shots, and early on the Celtics were missing it. But going back to the Grant Williams thing, he comes in, and not soon after he comes in, he hits the nicest three outside of Derek White the Celtics saw in 2 games. And it's like, I think it was the third quarter, and I'm like, how is he not in there, if anything, just to give this team some energy, because they just looked flat right from the get-go. And that's obviously where the coaching, you can blame coaching and that type of stuff on Joe Mazzulla, and you can certainly second guess some of the decisions. But here's the funny thing is he's been criticized a lot for his timeouts. One of the timeouts the Celtics took immediately led to a Miami run. So it's like,
that was crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's just like, okay, so what, I mean, again, it sometimes it's just, it doesn't, it's just not meant to be, I guess. But the Celtics did a lot of tripping over their own feet in this series. And we saw a lot of that come to a head in Game 7 because, they were just, quite frankly, they were bad. You didn't get enough Grant Williams. I don't think you got enough Robert Williams. I don't know what it is about the Williamses, but they should have seen more minutes. And look, I just, the frustrating thing about this team, and look, this isn't exclusive to Joe Mazzulla. This was happening last year. This was happening, with the year before. So their obsession. I understand how important the 3-point game is in this league. It is. But I think they just become it's like it's like when you're on a slot machine, okay, and you're like, you hit a little bit of a cold streak and you're like, all right, I'm gonna get out of this. Guess what, John? You never get out of it. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And I think this obsessiveness with trying to fix it, like work through the problems, is misguided because, well, what they should do is like, well, okay, let's scale back the 3. Let's continue to get points by getting the ball in. And I mean, if anything, get opportunities for free throws. Like, and that's the thing, John. Like, it's not just about getting, high percentage shots or easy layups. It's about creating extra opportunities at the free throw line where you'd otherwise wouldn't get any points. And it's like these add up, and it's like the Celtics just give it away. Not only, and to your point, like you said before, it's not like they're creating these opportunities by rotating the basketball and getting open shots. No, they're just coming up the court, making a pass, sometimes not even, and just hucking the ball up. And you're like, like Miami's not even set on defense. Why are you hucking it up? Like that's the frustrating part, and I think that's why I think a lot of Celtics fans naturally today are frustrated and maybe reacting one way or the other. Trade this, trade that, blow this up, blow that up. I'm not quite sure what the Celtics should do moving forward, but this was not a good game to make your decisions easy in the offseason.
No, because really, what, two players played well, right?
Yeah.
Derek White and Rob Williams when he was out there. So those guys can leave the arena last night saying, look, I gave you everything I had. I contributed to what could have been a win if everybody else stepped up. And again, we didn't see enough of Grant Williams to really judge how he was playing. But yeah, I think that you sometimes have to just kind of calm down in this situation and figure out what you want to do. If Mazzulla comes back, you're going to have to bring in some veteran assistants to help him, and also get some media training for him, because you can't have the face of the franchise. And look, it's generally the player's the face of the franchise, but the guy who interacts with the media a couple of hundred times a year. I mean, he has to meet with them before the game, after practice, press conferences, etc. You got to be able to handle that a lot better than him. You can't act like Greg Popovich and Bill Belichick when you have 0 championships. Those guys have 11. So they have to work on that too if they're going to retain him. But yeah, it still falls down to the players. I mean, they're the guys who missed the shots. And they're the guys who, fell asleep on defense. And next thing you know, Miami's hitting some wide open threes and you end up losing the series. But the other thing too that gave the Celtics a lot of trouble, and it has through 3 different coaches. You're so right, Ian. This happened under Brad Stevens, under Ime Udoka, now under Joe Mazzulla. They can't handle a zone defense. And one of the reasons is because they just kind of pass the ball around the perimeter and take threes, which is exactly what the opposition wants you to do.
Mm-hmm.
The way to attack it, and they did a little bit in the series, is get Marcus Smart in the middle of that defense. Marcus Smart's their best low post offensive player, believe it or not, at 6'4". Have him with his back to the basket, almost like in the Meadowlark lemon roll.
Mm-hmm.
Get him the ball. He can actually go to the basket and score. I know it's only 2 points, but that's better than none. Or he can pass out of that situation to the open guy. Now you make them pay. They got away from that. It was just your turn, my turn. Let's see if we can hit a 3.
And look, I mean, he's a guy also who can create contact and
mm-hmm.
make it look a little bit worse than what it was. So it's like you're giving up those opportunities for, at times, like just hucking the ball up. And again, you're right. It's so frustrating. And that's where it's like, okay, that would seem like a coaching problem. But unless all 3 of these guys are following the exact same playbook, you know what I mean? It has to, just something has to change in that aspect. I don't know exactly what they need to do. Do they need to trade one of the, do they need to trade Jaylen Brown? Because now the question of whether or not he's a supermax player is obviously going to be at the forefront. And like I said, I mean, it's what have you done for me lately? And the last thing people are going to remember is this Game 7 for Jaylen Brown, and it does not look good. So how much of that is going to impact his future with this team? I don't know. Quite frankly, I really don't know what I want. Like, because I look at this team and I'm saying, okay, you can run this team back and very much compete for a chance to go to the NBA Finals, no doubt about it. But is just competing enough right now? And I don't think it is. I think at this point, and we're not saying that Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum's running out of time. That's ridiculous. He's 24 years old. He has a very long and I believe very successful career ahead of him. Are people getting impatient that they haven't won yet? Absolutely. And you know what? Maybe it's appropriate. Maybe it's a little premature because, well, again, there's the standard of success in this region, and I'm talking about Boston and New England, that area, that it's going to be hard to live up to moving forward because, well, quite frankly, you're not going to have the very best player to ever play the game in any particular sport. I'm guessing, John. If that happens, well, guess what? We struck gold twice. But right now, you can't expect that type of sustained success every single year. So the fact that, the Celtics have continuously been in the Eastern Conference Finals, they've been to an NBA final, and very much been in a position to win, can be looked at as a success. However, I don't know if they can come back the exact same as they did this year and think that they can take the next step forward, because deja vu, it's not quite June yet, unfortunately, but it's late May, early June, and we're talking about the same issues that have befallen the Celtics for yet another season under a different head coach.
5 of the last 7 years, they've made it to the conference finals. 5 of the last 7 years, they've seen the opposition celebrating being presented a trophy, whether it was the Eastern Conference Championship trophy or the NBA Finals trophy. 4 of those 5 times, Ian, took place at TD Garden. So that used to be a place that opposing players didn't want to come and play in big games. Now, those other teams seem more comfortable than the Celtics. The Celtics, in their last 21 home playoff games, are 9-12. In their last 21 road playoff games, they're 14-7. If you told me, a little over a year ago that the Celtics over the next 2 years would go 14-7 on the road in the playoffs, I'd say they won at least one championship and is probably getting ready to play Denver for back-to-back championships, and neither's the case. The problem I see with this team is that they kind of remind me a little bit now, to keep it current, of the San Francisco 49ers. Like every year, we talk about the 49ers, the best roster in football. They can't quite get the quarterback right, but man, are they loaded on both sides of the ball. And what do they have to show for it? One Super Bowl loss and a couple conference championship losses. That's kind of what the Celtics have done over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And that's not good enough. It's not good enough because you're good enough to win a championship, but you keep coming up short against teams that you should be.
Yeah, and look, I mean, and like I said, despite all those struggles, you're talking about a team that in reality was, obviously just a win away from going back to the finals. So, I mean, the margin for, being a champion, I mean, it's that final leg is so difficult for this team in particular, apparently. And that's something that they're going to have to figure out how to overcome, because I know you've brought up comparisons, not with the Celtics team, but with other teams to the Braves of the '90s, a team that was year in, year out, great roster, talent across the board, dominant pitching staff, but had one title to show for it. Now the Celtics, they don't have those very best players at the position, kind of like the Braves did, but they also don't have at least one championship to show for it. And you're starting to look at them now. It's been 5, 6 years of really good rosters, particularly the last 3 years. I'm not going to, I'm not going to sit here and pretend, have revisionist history about the early Jason Tatum years where they were kind of overachievers and, probably succeeded a little bit more than what they probably should have. But the fact remains that they've been a contender for half a decade now, and now you're becoming a top contender and the team in the East, quote unquote, every single year, but yet you've fallen short. So yeah, there is pressure building. I do think something has to change. I don't know how drastic though, John. Do I think if you move a guy like Jaylen Brown, you have to get a star level player back. I mean, you cannot just do a draft pick trade, right?
Oh, absolutely, you can't. You're win now mode. If you trade him for future draft picks, then you're punting on the next season. You got to get someone of close to equal value, which is tough to pull off. I mean, I put the name Damian Lillard out there. Lillard's 6 years older than Brown. I think in Game 7 he would have come up bigger than Brown did last night. But you are talking about someone who is 6 years older. And again, you got to make the money work. And Brown is going to become the highest paid player in basketball this summer, unless the Celtics don't offer him the Supermax deal. For some period of time, he will be the highest paid player in basketball. Now, that goes into effect after next season. So you do have a little wiggle room there, but you sign him, you have him, and you go from there with it to see. The biggest problem I have with Jaylen Brown is we can debate whether he's worth a Supermax deal. I mean, second team All-NBA, so by definition, he's a top 10, I think top 15 player. Is he happy here? Does he want to be here? That's the other big question, right? Because in these interviews late in the season, he's talking about the city, that he's not comfortable here, and that may all be true, and that's an issue. Is he okay being the number 2 guy to Jason Tatum? I don't think so. So, does he have problems with teammates? Does he have problems with management? Those are other issues that are, quite frankly, tougher to solve.
I don't think problems with teammates or management is an issue. There may be a just a better or wanting maybe he just doesn't like maybe he's just grown tired of being here, and that's
Could be
fine.
7 years now, right?
Yeah,
7 years.
and look, it happens. It's nothing against the city. It's not like it's sometimes he just maybe he is like you said, just not engaged enough, and maybe he realizes it because look, I don't believe that there's any like I do think this team is pretty close, like very close actually. I think that's one of their strengths, but so like all that talk after game 3 I think was very much a figment of the imagination of several people. But the reality of it is he can still be fine with his teammates, but not happy in the situation that he's in. And I think that might be the case. I think you're right there, where maybe he's just not happy being here. And that's not. I'm not saying that to belittle Jaylen Brown. I mean, everyone's human. There's been situations I've been in where I've liked the people, but I just wasn't happy in it. So, it's perfectly normal to feel that way. So if that's the case, maybe it is in the interest of both parties to maybe move on. Maybe there's some sort of dynamic that needs to change. I don't know what it is, John. I don't know if it's a talent change, a personality change, anything. I'm not quite sure, but there's something missing with this team that they just have not figured out over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, could it be a veteran player that comes in that has those type of leadership qualities? Al Horford's not that guy. I mean, he's 37 years old, but he's kind of a quiet guy.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem, and this is a compliment to these guys, they have an incredibly smart team. I mean, you just go right on down the line. I mean, Jaylen Brown, former valedictorian in high school. Malcolm Brogdon's going to run for the U.S. Senate at some point. I'm convinced of that. Grant Williams comes from a family of educators. Tatum's a bright guy. Marcus Smart is a bright guy who is great in dealing with fans and media. They've got a lot of really smart guys on that team. Maybe they need someone who's just goofy and crazy that comes in and is not fearful of the situation. Maybe this is a team that's got a lot of George Costanzas that overanalyzes things a bit too much, and you kind of need Kramer to come in and make everyone laugh. I mean, maybe they need that type of player who says, guys, we're the best team. Let's just go out and prove it. Don't fear failure.
Yeah, and someone said it on Twitter, and I don't know who tweeted it, so I can't give credit. So I apologize. They had said that the way the Celtics play at home is not, we need to protect this house, the classic, we need to protect this house. It's let's not lose, let's kind of just passively aggressive, oh, we're up by 5 or 6 early on. We're okay. We're meant to win. We're supposed to win. And that's the type of mentality it seems like, the Celtics have at home. There's no killer instinct at home. Like in a situation in the past where it's like you come into game 7 in Boston. I mean, the crowd was ready. They were amped. It just didn't take long for the Celtics to give them nothing to cheer about, though. And that's what I think is the problem. They did so well in game 5, and something I talked about was you got to play off the crowd and really play to that level. They just haven't done that anywhere near a consistent basis in a long time at home in the playoffs, and that's concerning. So, again, I don't know how much you want to put on Jason Tatum's injury. Obviously, 14 shots, and he just wasn't shooting either. I think at one point his shot total, I don't know what it ended up as, but at the point in the game that I saw it, I think it was in the third quarter, was just, you're like, this is not what you need from him in game 7. You need him to be taking more shots, taking more, obviously scoring more. 14 points is not going to cut it. So a lot of things wrong, John. Unfortunately, we are here talking about this game 7 loss.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we kept hearing, well, you want him on the court because he's a decoy, and he still rebounded and did some other decent things, but that's great to have a decoy out there, but if the other guys aren't shooting well, then what's the point?
Yeah.
You need production from Jason Tatum. I mean, again, it's win or go home. It was that simple. It wasn't game 5 of a series that was tied 2-2. This was it. It was just odd, too. Like, when he went over to the bench after the injury, it didn't even look like they were treating it. So at that point, even Reggie Miller said this, Well, probably that's a good sign. A lot of times guys roll ankles.
I'm not taking anything Reggie Miller says.
Yeah, he's. Yeah, I'm glad that we won't be listening to him anymore.
Reggie Miller's the guy that spent all Game 7 praising how great Caleb Martin has been and how much he's carried this team, to only vote for Jimmy Butler for Eastern Conference Player of the Game. It's like Reggie, what are you doing? Like, but it's
So it's just, without question. I mean, so they weren't. I'm sure at halftime they did something, but
I'm sure it's a matter of over the course of time it swelled up and it became worse. I mean, that's just how it is. We saw the replay; he landed right on it. I mean, I'm surprised he even was out there. So I imagine it got worse over time. And again, I mean, at that point, what do you do? It's Jason Tatum. You're not going to sit for a Game 7, but at the same time, your image is less important than scoring points at this point. You need to be able to score the basketball. And if he wasn't going to be able to do it, someone else had to, and no one else stepped up. And that's the disappointing thing, is because it's not necessarily on Jason Tatum to be the best player every single game for the Celtics. I mean, you need other players to step up. I mean, hell, even LeBron's needed other players to step up. So the problem is I feel like more often than not, he doesn't have a great game. And again, it happens. He's human. It's very apparent that the other players around him, outside of obviously Derek White, we're big Derek White fans today, and every day. Because
he played really well. Yeah. I mean, he did a great job throughout this entire season. In fact, it probably was the case if they had won last night and he had scored 25, that he probably would have been series MVP.
Nah, they would have given it Jimmy Butler anyways. You kidding me?
Right.
Even in a losing series, we'll give it to Jimmy because he makes weird faces.
Jimmy Butler MVP in a losing team. Yeah, that probably would be the case. But yeah, I mean, it's the old person, Brown. You just did, and like you said, early he hit a couple of shots. I'm like, okay, he's going to take over until his teammate is feeling a little bit better. And a lot of times with those sprained ankles, there's a little bit of a shock, and then you see the guys tighten it up to keep the swelling down, and you go ahead and play. But so much of Tatum's game is built on his ability to drive to the basket, and he just wasn't able to. And now you relegate it to, mid-range or deep threes, and no one was hitting those. So it kind of rendered him, I wouldn't say useless, but less than what he normally is.
No, but, 14 points. Yeah.
No, that's less than half of what he's averaged throughout the season. And look, he had 51 in Game 7 against the 76ers. Don't expect that to happen because that's a record. But, if he's healthy, you want to get 25 to 28 from him, and similar to Jaylen Brown, like you did in Game 6. That's what you got from those two guys in Game 6. I think they scored a total of 57 points, which is great. If you get that, you're in good shape. But they just weren't up for it. One injured and one clearly playing poorly. So it's going to be another tough offseason. The problem with basketball is the offseason is so short, right? Because it's like 3 months. Like football is like if you don't make the Super Bowl, 7 months. And it's kind of structured with, here comes free agency, here comes the draft and OTAs and all this fun stuff. With this, it's pretty sudden. The draft comes late in June. Free agency is like a week after that. And contracts are signed and coaches are on the move. So a lot will happen over the next 5 to 6 weeks to determine what the Celtics look like next year.
Yeah. No, again, they're perfectly capable of coming back with the same team and competing. It's just I don't know if you do anything more than just compete as opposed to taking the next step. So we'll see, John. We'll see. NBA Finals, they begin on Thursday, right?
Thursday.
Yeah. Thursday. Yes, I'm looking right at it actually. So yeah. I mean, it would be a good matchup. We'll talk more about that series on Thursday, obviously. Real quick, though, I do want to bring up I guess the news of the Jimmy Garoppolo injury waiver, something that could potentially complicate his debut with the Raiders if he's not healthy. According to most reports, I mean, he's on track to be healthy, but obviously this is the concern with Jimmy Garoppolo. My perspective, or at least my mind, and this is how I hope things play out, because why not? Tom Brady's a part owner, John. let's cut through all the nonsense and just get to the point. All right, Tom Brady, come down from the front office, come play with Devontae Adams. Okay, all right. lock Jimmy G out of the facility again, just like you did. TB12. Okay, I don't believe that, but no, I mean, look, honestly, the Raiders, this is exactly what you get when you sign Jimmy Garoppolo. You get a guy who's, when he's on the field, plays pretty good football, isn't necessarily going to do anything for you to lose, doesn't necessarily do anything for you to win, but, playing efficient football definitely helps. This would be very Jordan-esque, obviously. Michael Jordan was part owner of the Washington Wizards, came back and played. I don't know what the complications would be. I don't know what the issue would be, quite frankly, because it's not like he's an owner of another team and he's coming to play for the Raiders. It's like, who the hell cares? I mean, I understand people are going to put up a fuss, but like, I'm rooting for it. I hope it happens for obvious reasons, as I sit here in my TB12 t-shirt. I just want to see him play football again. And I would love for, nearly 10 years after Jimmy G was supposed to repeat, Tom Brady replaces Jimmy G. That would just be one for the books. So,
yeah, he would probably have to divest his ownership for the time being to go out and play, but I'm sure they'll just paperwork, dot the I's, cross the T's. Why not? They've got a pretty good offense there, right? I'm obviously Devontae Adams, we both think the best receiver in football. Maybe Gronk and Edelman come out of retirement and rejoin Tom Brady in Vegas, because who doesn't want to go to Vegas? Josh Jacobs is the reigning rushing champ, right? So you've got a lot of pieces there, and you get to play in a system pretty well because you played in it for a while with Josh McDaniels as your head coach.
You created it, essentially. I mean,
you pretty much
didn't create. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, they didn't create the style, but the Josh McDaniels system, quote unquote, was. Well,
yeah, him getting jobs has a lot to do with Tom Brady.
That's true.
A lot of guys getting jobs has a lot to do with Tom Brady. I mean, talk about the butterfly effect. But, yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to see this? And, again, Garoppolo, even if he comes back for training camp early in the season, what's the chance he's going to play an entire season? So,
look, I think they should do this if Jimmy Garoppolo was 100% healthy. You kidding me? Forget it. Like, I mean, I obviously think Brady's a better quarterback today, so... and how awesome would that be to have that division all of a sudden have Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Herbert.
And Russell Wilson. I know you're not a huge fan, and I'm not really either, but the guy is a Super Bowl quarterback.
Sure. Russell Wilson, too. Why not, John?
He's clearly the worst quarterback in that division by a long stretch at this point. Yeah, no, I mean, you see Mahomes, Brady twice. I think the Jets are going to play the Raiders this year, so you get to see Brady and Rodgers yet again. And the Patriots are going to Vegas mid-season. That would be interesting.
I mean, come on, Tom, if you're listening, I'm going to tag you in this later. If you're listening, please do it. Please do it.
For the children.
For the children.
Especially the mid-30-year-old guy in Tampa.
I was going to say the 36-year-old man-child living in St. Petersburg right now.
Please.
Yeah, please, for the love of God. My Bruins lost. My Celtics lost. Give me something. Give me something to root for. Let me see you play football again. So, no, speaking of Vegas, though, they obviously last night, if you didn't know, clinched their spot in the Stanley Cup final with a big 6-0 win over the Dallas Stars. Good for Vegas, good for Bruce Cassidy. I know some Bruins fans might, feel a little bit bitter watching him go, but, it is what it is, and I think it should be a pretty entertaining Cup final. I'd be rooting for Vegas, not necessarily because the Panthers beat the Bruins, but hey, I like Vegas. What can I say? I'm partial to the city, so I'm gonna root for them in this situation. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a pretty good series between the two teams. I wonder though if all this extra rest might affect the Panthers, in game one and possibly in this series. But then again, this team kind of seems like a team of destiny, so to speak. So good for Vegas. Congrats to Vegas. And certainly it should make for a pretty interesting Cup final.
Yeah, the Florida Panthers, like the Denver Nuggets, long layoff heading into the championship round. And again, it's never happened before that the same city produced the Stanley Cup champ and the NBA Finals champ in the same season. There is that possibility. Now, I know the Panthers playing Sunrise, but let's call them South Florida. So you could have Miami or Greater Miami winning both championships in the same year, both as 8 seeds and both pulling off upsets against teams from here who had tremendous regular seasons. I mean, just odd, really odd. I'm sure Disney and TNT must be thrilled with these finals matchups. Man.
Well, I mean, look, it's going to be good. I mean, from a pure, like, obviously the marketing, might, from that standpoint, might look at it as a bad matchup, but as long as we get good play on both sides, like, look, I think the NBA has far more potential to be a lopsided affair, because I say this now, but then again, I don't believe guys like Caleb Martin can continue to play at the level that he has. And quite frankly, I just haven't seen a lot out of Miami's two quote unquote best players, and that's Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, to sit there and tell me, they can really go against Denver. Like Denver, I'm not going to say it's going to be a sweep or a blow. I think they're going to have pretty easy control of this series.
Oh, they're better.
Yeah,
I mean, they've been the best team in the Western Conference all year, and look what they've done in the postseason. They're 12-3.
Yeah,
they really haven't even broken a sweat in getting to the NBA Finals. So again, long layoff. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe TNT, when they're doing the Stanley Cup Final, can maybe have Shaq and Barkley do the pre-game show, and in between periods, because they'll be better than Gretzky.
Yeah, well, look, I like Wayne. I know he's not quite the personality, but he's smart. I like Wayne. I'm not a hockey player. I'm not gonna trash on Wayne Gretzky, but
okay.
But anyways, no, we'll talk more about both these series later in this week, and then maybe we can start shifting our focus. Joel and Kyle apparently blaming me for Florida's success over Boston, and you know what? Quite frankly, I'm starting to believe them. I don't know if I have nothing to say.
Where does Brady reside?
Yeah, well,
Brady
resides in Miami, so
Florida. Yeah, and he just bought into the Raiders, and now the Vegas Knights are in the Stanley Cup.
So again, that might
absurdity continues.
So that's definitely going Game 7 overtime then, and
yep,
whatever Brady's feeling that day will be how it is. But anyways, we'll talk about that later in the week. We'll touch on some other things, and of course, if we get any news on DeAndre Hopkins' future team, we will certainly talk about that. But until then, have a great Tuesday. Have a great rest of your week, and enjoy the transition to June. June. Thank you, everyone, and we will talk to you later.